Hey, this is CTOS. I want to do a quick primer for Azwel. Some basic stuff and some more complicated stuff involving his soul charge, and kind of explaining how the switch mechanics work between his weapon modes and how they affect his gameplay. There's a lot of things to kind of unpack with him because he's a little weird and he's relatively unconventional compared to a lot of the cast in the game. But he's actually pretty simple once you understand what he actually is doing. So we'll go ahead and go through all of that. So the way that Azwel works is he has three stances. He has Tragedy of War, Comedy of Errors, and Beauty of Balance. Beauty being his sword form, Comedy of Errors being spear, and Tragedy of War being axe. I'm just going to refer to them as their weapons form rather than the names. So the biggest takeaway is that all of his normals and certain attacks he has access to will change depending on the previous weapon you used. There are two ways to get into each stance. The first way to get into each stance is to actually use K. He does not have a K. He just has stances. So 5K causes him to go into a sword stance. 4K causes spear, and 6K causes axe. All three of those will put you into those three predetermined modes, the Beauty of War and Comedy of Errors and all that. What that means is when you're in those modes is that any weapon that you use after that will be faster as long as it's the same weapon. So since he cycles through multiple weapons, depending on the normals you're using, you want to focus on using similar normals with similar weapon types to make sure that your normals are faster. Faster is actually really important because some normals are almost unusable unless you're in the stance. So as an example, 66B is really fast now, but resetting takes me out of the stance because I haven't used a button technically yet. And if I use 66B now, it's much slower. As you can see, when you use a normal for the first time in a cycle, it'll show a little ring next to Azwel. So there's a ring there that indicates that I am now in Beauty of Balance. That ring indicates that any sword normal I do from here on out will be 8 frames faster. So whatever that normal was previously, it is 8 frames faster. So as an example, 5A is typically 18 frames, but now that I'm in Beauty of Balance, that normal is now 10 frames. So importance in making sure that you cycle which weapons and which normals you're using based on use case. So if you're being, someone's really being aggressive, typically it'd be better to stay in sword stance because you're going to get access to your fastest normals. If you try to risk it and use some of your slower normals, especially like out of stance, you're going to be chunking an extra 8 frames onto whatever normal you're using. So it's best to stay in swords and try to keep off the aggression that way. The other thing about him is that whenever you switch into a certain weapon, on top of getting the 8 frame advantage, you also have access to new attacks. They're called weapon arts, and you get access to your weapon arts via B and K. So it's just a regular stance attack. So depending on which stance you're in, so now I'm in axe stance or Tragedy of War, I'm going to go ahead and do B and K. You get access to a really powerful horizontal sweeping 60 damage attack. The same thing applies to sword and Comedy of Errors. So if I'm in Beauty of Balance, I can go ahead and do that weapon art, which is a half screen hitting, hit confirmable launcher. Really strong. It's best for whiff punishing because it's like negative a billion on block, so just be careful. Same thing applies, like I said, to Comedy of Errors. So in Comedy of Errors, I get this access to this auto GI get off me move, almost like a reversal. And again, it has its own use case, but they all have their uses. On top of getting faster normals and that weapon art, your break attack also changes. So depending on which weapon you have out previously, your break attack will actually change. So axe being the farthest reaching, if you're in spear, you'll get an auto GI with a short reaching break attack. And if you're in sword form, you'll get a medium reaching break attack. So this will all change, again, depending on your weapon. So there's going to be a lot of times where you're going to want to stay in a certain weapon depending on which weapon you used previously. A good example of this is if I really want to get a good launcher, I want to stay in axe form right now, so that way that my wall running 6B is actually really fast, and that's really important for him because that's his ring out / launcher. The only other things you really need to know that are important is when he is in Ascension mode. So Ascension mode essentially will let him use access to all 3 weapon arts, and also have all his weapons out at the same time. The things that can trigger Ascension Mode are both grabs, and as well as 6BA and 22AB. So both those will actually trigger Ascension Mode. Now, outside of Soul Charge, Ascension Mode will only last for the next hit. So once Ascension Mode is triggered, anything I do next will activate my my mode. So, as you notice, Break Attack now uses all 3 weapons. So now it's really strong. And also I have access to all 3 weapon arts. So I can do the sword throw, or I can do the low hitting axe. All 3 of those are now accessible. On top of that, I also have access to my fastest normal since all my weapons are out. So I don't have to switch. It's pretty cool. Only thing is it only lasts for 1 hit. Once you use that first normal, I am now in axe mode because I've exhausted my Ascension Mode to use my axe normal. So as you can see here, I have to switch out. The only mode where that doesn't matter is Soul Charge. So Soul Charge gives him access to all 3, gives him all 3 access to all 3 weapon arts. It gives him crazy combos that he can do off of all these hits. He can use his fastest normals. He's just crazy in Soul Charge. So when you're in Soul Charge, take advantage of that. Use your fastest normals only. Use your best normals because you're always going to have 8 frame startup, or 8 frame increase in startup. It's just a good time all around. The only other things about Soul Charge that are important is that this will cause ring outs, and also it's a break attack. The same thing applies to his 6B as well. 6B will actually do a huge crumple state. It does the same state in non-Soul Charge, but the difference is in Soul Charge, it is a lot scarier if they have meter. So you can actually combo that into super and do like 130 damage, I think, 125 damage. Last thing to note is going to be what the actual stances themselves do on the K. So 5K, 4K, and 6K. 5K gives you access to 3 normals. One of them is a charging mid. The next one is going to be a standing high 5A. And you can also combo that into different things. So you can actually combo that into a mid spear or into a launcher. 4K gives you access into this back stance and the shield. He has a couple of different strings out of that as well. And 6K gives him access to axe, and both axe normals are actually break attacks. The second one being a high though, so the horizontal is duckable. So just to wrap it up, stick in axe form if you're on the mid-range. Stick in shield form if you want to get some auto GIs into guaranteed reversals. Stick in sword form if you want to stay aggressive or get an opponent off of you using your fastest normal. But again, you're going to have to commit to getting into one of those stances and switching it out constantly in order to actually make effective use of it. Otherwise, he's just going to be constantly slow and be doing hilariously slow normals. So that's about it. That's all I can really think of for now. See ya.